Hey guys, Glenn here again. Welcome back to Gear Facts. It's pretty late on a Tuesday night and I've been working on my plans for a whole new concept in home keyboards, and I'd like to share those ideas with you now. Those of you who've been watching Gear Facts over the years will know that I've owned and reviewed a heck of a lot of keyboards over the years, and I've done a lot of complaining and praising about their various design features. My last video heavily referenced some of the best features of my favorite keyboards, and now I've come up with this design. Now I know at first sight this doesn't seem radically different to keyboards that we're used to seeing, but let me take you through some of the features a little bit more closely. What I've tried to do is blend together all the best ideas I've seen in other keyboards I've reviewed in the past to create one nicely designed, ergonomic, versatile keyboard that's just conducive to making great music. And these sketches represent my finalized idea. Starting with the front view of my concept idea, the first feature I want to point out is the headphone socket right here, right in the center. The idea behind this was that your headphones could plug straight in there and the cable would just run up your body towards the headphones without interfering with your hands. Many of you may have found to your frustration that headphones coming from the back tend to get in the way of everything. They hang over all the controls. They tend to interfere with one hand or the other depending which side the socket is on, making it more difficult to play. I think this design overcomes that and gives you a nice clear workspace. Down at the side here we've got the pitch bend wheel. You'll notice that there's no modulation wheel. Part of making this design was the idea that the cost of manufacturing would have to be kept down. As you know, there are plenty of entry-level and mid-range keyboards that do not have modulation wheels, and part of the thrust behind this idea was creating a keyboard that was within a reasonable budget. So for the moment I've omitted a modulation wheel, but what I have done is add an octave button right here. The idea being that you could turn the pitch bend wheel and get your usual single tone worth of pitch bend, but if you were to hold down this button, the wheel would then be converted to an entire octave of pitch bend. It may not suit everybody's playing style, but it's something that I thought would be a good dynamic controller for most musicians. While we're looking from this angle, just take a look at this handle here on the side. The idea is that there are handles actually embedded into the sides of the instrument and the back. This is intended to make it easier for owners to maneuver the keyboard in and out of vehicles, in and out of position on stage, and simply to carry them around from A to B. Moving up a little bit here, you'll see that I've got cutoff, resonance, and an assignable knob here. These are arranged in a kind of an arc. You can see the shape of this panel right here. The idea behind this is that your palm can sit in this area unobstructed and unlikely to interfere with other keys, and yet each of these knobs will be equidistant and therefore easier to reach with your fingers. So no obstruction around here, easy access to the controls, which will hopefully amount to better dynamic control of your playing. In this part of the keyboard, the design is a little bit more conventional. We've got the display here, obviously, directional keys to guide your way through the various menus. Right here though, what I've done is create a recessed slot for an SD card. The reason it's recessed, as you probably realized, is so that when things slide over the keyboard or when you move your hand rapidly across the workspace, you're not going to accidentally bump that SD card and cause damage. More typically, we've got a keypad at the side here, although I did want to point out in my design that I really wanted a simple enter or yes key and an exit or no key on either side. Similar to what you see on Yamaha and Casio keyboards, but sometimes there is a yes key and a no key and an enter and an exit key, and they're all separate, and it all gets quite confusing as to which one you use in which situation. So I guess my message to the major manufacturers there is let's have one yes key and one no key to do or not do whatever is on the screen. Another idea that I'm going to include, and this is not one of my ideas, this actually comes from the Yamaha DJX, a keyboard that I've made many videos about. It's the idea of having functions for each of the piano keys. So I press a function access key and then the piano keys control a different function, something other than just playing a note. For example, if we're in a mixer mode, we might be able to press a function key and mix in and out different instruments that are applied to different keys. So we may have rhythm, bass, arpeggio on different keys that we can mix in and out. On the DJX, you can also select individual parts of the music and apply the dynamic controls. This is a really good system that's controlled completely through software and therefore saves manufacturers the cost of creating additional buttons on the front panel. Quick access to patches is also extremely important for most home keyboard players. Here we've got the usual row of buttons in which we can save patches that we've created with our sound settings, rhythm settings, effect settings, and everything else that can be applied to a memory bank. The difference here though is that each of the buttons has an LED right above it, or it could be an illuminated button. This avoids the trouble that we see a lot in home keyboards of having unnamed patches when we can't see which button that we're saved in, and if you're like me, you'll often find that you'll accidentally save patches you've created over other patches that you've created and you lose work. This is an inexplicable and ongoing design flaw seen in Casio and Yamaha keyboards for many years, and I think it would only take a tiny bit of attention and consideration to this issue to make keyboards a lot more fun and less frustrating to use. And the other thing that's really important here, and I'm drawing inspiration from guitar multi-effect systems, each of the patches that you create and apply to a button can also actually be named. A little further up, we've got another idea which I may have overemphasized in my last video, and that is the idea of having sockets on the front panel rather than right at the back where you can't reach them. So I've got an auxiliary in here in stereo, left and right's out, MIDI in and out. I just happened to forget to put a USB socket in, but I have put it over on the other side of the keyboard, around here somewhere. There it is. Moving yet further along, we've got this weird structure here. Again, I mentioned this in my last video. The idea is that you could have a speaker that pivots upwards. When folded down, the speaker would be quite conventional in a very familiar design of facing straight up at the player. The idea of having a speaker that can pivot upwards is that you can play to an audience and yet still be able to hear the performance quite easily yourself. Obviously, this isn't going to be a stadium-filling sound, but I do think it would be helpful for a small performance. And here we see that speaker again from the back. This is one of my earlier sketches. From this angle, I also want to draw your attention to the battery door. This has been put on the back of the keyboard. Every other keyboard of this size and shape, you have to lift it up and flip it over. On this keyboard, the idea is that it only takes minimal movement to get in there and replace those batteries. Moving the keyboard around to do things is a constant source of frustration for me, so this is an idea that I consider to be particularly important. And once again, we see a carry handle built into the back of the module here, and this design will enable a user simply to pick it up and carry it around like a briefcase. Very easy, no need for an external case until you actually want to transport your keyboard. Then you might decide to wrap it up in a proper road case. Just over here we see the speaker in its seated position, the more classical format where the sound travels straight up towards the player. A handle on the end here to complement the handle at the other end discussed in the previous frame. And then a nice clear space here to put the brand name of whichever company decides to make this excellent keyboard. So for the moment guys, that completes my concept keyboard ideas. I'd welcome any further discussion or comments that you might have about your ideas for what would make the home keyboard a better thing, more conducive to making great music, and most importantly, just for having fun while we're playing music, something that people often forget. Thanks again for watching Gear Facts, guys. I look forward to seeing you next time.